Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric, and this is Flyin Miata. Welcome to another episode of Facebook Live. Today we're going to discuss something really easy to do to stiffen the chassis of your car, and that is shock tower braces. So over here I've got a couple of examples. I've got a beautiful brand new out of the box Flyin Miata shock brace and one that we dug out of the back of the shop. So one of them is, just plain in black. It says Flyin Miata on it. It's awesome. And the other one is aluminum. It has these really cool red mounts. So what's the difference? Why is one better than the other? Well, those are good questions. First of all, I'm taking a look at this fancy one here that I really don't know where we got it, what brand it is. When you mount it in the car, the first thing that's going to happen is you'll take a corner and one side will get loaded. And you'll notice what happens with this bar is that it actually pivots. So instead of being a solid mount, it's going to roll with the car. And the other thing is that even though this is a fairly substantial piece of aluminum, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but just me pushing on it makes it flex, which kind of renders it pretty useless as a shock tower brace. So we've remedied that by making the bars pretty much as straight as possible and giving it two solid mounts to the tower so that when the whole apparatus is bolted in the car, it produces a nice solid structure. So a couple of features about the Flyin Miata bar. Of course, you've got two bolts. It's going to come with shims just in case you're working with something a little bit different. The holes in the bar itself are slotted. No Miatas are really the same shape they were in when they came out of the factory, so we take that into account. We've got the towers designed so that the bolts or the shock top nuts are actually on the outside. So if you've got something like a master cylinder brace, for example, you'll still be able to use it because the stud is exposed. So that's kind of covers the basics of this. As I'm going along here, make sure to comment below, post any questions you have. If you post those and we're still live, I'll go ahead and try to answer them for you. If you're seeing this a little bit later and you still have questions, you can still post them and we'll get to them as soon as we can. So just to give you an idea of what one of these nice Flyin Miata bars, oh, and by the way, notice that it comes with the logo all ready to go. Awesome. Let's take a look at one that's already mounted in a car. So here you can see there's plenty of clearance over the engine. This goes right over the top of this NA8 1.8 liter. Fits right over a nice Flyin Miata Stage 1 turbo kit. You can see some other goodies down in there. There's a nice coolant reroute that we're working on. Some nice Moroso or Magnacore spark plug wires. All kinds of goodies. Still has cruise control, relocation bracket. So having said all that, there were actually a couple of questions that popped up on Instagram. And one of them was really good, so we'll start with that one. Why don't we use a triangulated design? Why don't we have, say, a bar that goes across like this and another one that goes and attaches to the bulkhead or the firewall? Well, the tricky part about that is that you can see the seam right here. Below that is the actual firewall of the car. Above that is just a piece of metal. It only really creates a barrier between the engine bay and the gap under here where the wiper mechanisms are. So it's quite floppy. It doesn't have any structural rigidity, so it's not really a good mounting point. So triangulating, sure, that would probably be fancy and look cool, but it wouldn't really necessarily provide any functionality. So next question that we got on Instagram, why no rear upper brace? Why don't we have a shock brace for the rear of the car? Well, if you look at this, the front of the car, the shocks are mounted to a wheel well. There's actually a bubble of metal there. If you pull your carpet up in your trunk, you're going to see that the tops of the shocks are actually mounted to a flat piece of metal. It's not really a bubble like the the front of the car. Plus, they're quite close to the rear bulkhead, which is another stiff part of the car. There's so much structural rigidity back there already that you really don't need one. It's not really going to provide really any extra structural rigidity at that point. So car's already stiff there, don't need to worry about it. So now comes the versus question. Shock tower brace versus Delrin door bushings. So those two items kind of do separate jobs. So Delrin door bushing, if you want to come around, I think I can point at the one that's on this car. So this is a Delrin door bushing. This is the first gen. The second gen's a little bit different shape, but it's a harder material than the stock bushing that goes in there from the factory. So what this does, when you close your door, it holds the door still, very, very still. So what that does is it can eliminate a lot of rattles that you might have in your doors, and that also can translate into eliminating a lot of rattles in your dashboard. So as a result, it can mimic a chassis brace or something that stiffens the chassis, but really all it's doing is holding those doors still. Sure, you could probably argue that there's some structural rigidity involved, but you're asking that of, you know, a 4-inch piece of Delrin. So as a chassis brace or chassis stiffener, the shock tower brace is going to be a lot more effective in terms of handling and steering responses. So that's kind of the goal in a Miata. It's a car that handles really well, and as they age, they're going to, you know, become a little bit more floppy than they were when they rolled off the assembly line. So give it a little bit of love with a shock tower brace, and the result should be faster steering responses, faster handling responses, crisper inputs. Everything's going to feel just a little bit more telepathic, and that translates into a much more fun to drive car. So those are my questions from Instagram. I'll check in with Mike back there. Doesn't look like we have anything popping up on Facebook. So I really appreciate. Oh, does Mike have a question? Excellent. Mike is reminding me that now that we're about to wrap up, make sure to leave any comments or questions below if you're watching this video and we're already done filming. Really appreciate you joining us. We'll have something completely different next week, Thursday at 2 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Too bad we're not on daylight savings time anymore. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Eric at Flyin Miata. You all have a good afternoon.